Let's talk about AI generated music, but I want to go a little bit deeper on this topic and talk not just about AI music, which I think is cancer and is complete trash and no one actually wants, but I want to talk about the business model of streaming platforms, which I think is a deeper issue. I want to talk about the worst streaming platform, and I then want to talk about the psychology of music and why we as humans love music, what we need to be aware of when it comes to the music that we listen to and the streaming platforms and how we engage with how we stream the music, and really go into how we can get more out of music to have more joy in our life, and then really become aware of the business models behind the streaming platforms so we can kind of minimize the parasitic nature of them and just engage a little bit more consciously in how we enjoy and consume music, because there's so much here to understand. And I think having a bit of an awareness of what music gives us and why it gives us that can just enrich our lives in such a nice way. And it really enhances the human experience. So let's get into it. The first thing about AI generated music is that it seems to be becoming a bit of an issue. I've seen it popping up in the news, and there's been various articles where there have been AI generated artists generating millions of streams on streaming platforms, and people are becoming aware of this, and obviously it's creating a lot of controversy. Like, it's not good to see these artists, these fake artists, racking up millions of streams. And I think that speaks to our listening habits. How is it that AI, which is essentially just a copy, all AI can do when it generates music is it can just copy what's already out there. So it's very similar to what already exists. So there's nothing actually special about it. It's just very generic. Now, because of that, I'm not actually too worried about the music itself. I don't think it has any longevity. I don't think there's any staying power behind these AI generated artists. No one really cares or can create a deep attachment to them. But the thing that we need to be aware of is that there are certain contexts when we listen to music that we're more susceptible to listening to this stuff. Because basically, right, when we just put music on in the background and we want to focus on something else, and music is not forefront of our mind, the music itself is not the main thing. We just want something in the background to kind of change the atmosphere, the ambience, right? That is where we find this problem of AI generated music, and that is where it's actually a threat. And if you go onto YouTube now, or if you go onto any streaming platform, right? But I think, no, YouTube is a great example. Type in background jazz or smooth jazz or study music or lo-fi focus. That's where AI music is a real threat, and it will come up. And it's something to be aware of. And I think it's a problem. I hate listening to it. I hate generic stuff. I hate elevator music. But I appreciate that elevator music has a place. Generic background music where you're not really meant to think about it or engage with it too much. It's just something to put on in the background. Okay, fair enough. It has that place. It serves a purpose. But there's a real issue there in that obviously humans still had to make that background music up until recently. And this is where we get into streaming platforms, and the worst streaming platform, the one that I particularly hate, and the business model that they have, and why it's against human artists and it's against the artists themselves, and why this matters. So the streaming platform, which is the worst for this, is Spotify. I'm going to tell you a business practice that they do purposely to reduce the amount that they had to pay out to real artists. And that is from the main avenue of how people listen to to a lot of their music on Spotify is through their official created playlists. So if you type in something like lo-fi focus or background jazz or classical piano for studying, they have all these official playlists like that. And what Spotify have been doing for a number of years is they've been paying artists to do studio sessions where the artists essentially create, kind of elevator background music. They pay the artist, then Spotify own that recording. So they have some generic artist name, an artist profile on Spotify itself, which is actually completely owned by Spotify. Spotify own the rights. They don't have to pay any royalties to the artist. They just gave the artist a one-shot fee. And what they do is they fill their playlists, or at least they fill the relevant playlists with this background music of which they own. And because of that, it means less real artists can get onto these playlists. And then the share of the money that Spotify have to pay out from all the streams that they give to artists is lower. So it means that Spotify keep more money by owning more of the tracks that they push onto their own official playlists. Now, AI music becomes a big problem and a big threat, unless, of course, people completely reject it and cotton onto it, which I think people will very quickly have a problem with and identify. But AI music then becomes a threat because the incentive for someone like Spotify is to use as much of that AI background music as possible to reduce the amount of money that they have to pay out to real artists, because the share of human artists on these platforms are lesser. So it's a terrible business model for the state of music and the artists themselves. And it is a problem and it does concern me. But if we're aware of this, I think we can kind of consciously control how we engage with the music in our lives and how we can get more out of it and more joy and more feeling from music as a tool. And it's really important because music means so much to all of us in so many different ways. So I want to talk about the psychology of music now and talk a little bit about projection. So projection is a psychological concept as coined by Carl Jung, where something inside of us from our unconscious, it hooks onto things, hooks onto places and people and different experiences. We experience the world as like different objects, and that includes music. So when we really find an artist that we love, something within us, within our unconscious that we're not even aware of, it hooks onto that piece of music because that music makes us feel something about the artist speaks to us, their story, how they are, their personality, their character, the way they present themselves in the world, the feeling, the vibe, all of it makes such a difference in how we connect to that artist, to that piece of music. We form parasocial bonds naturally with music, with the artists. So that's why AI generated music itself is less of a threat in terms of having real staying power and real longevity, because no one's going to form real parasocial relationships with machine generated content, especially when people become aware of that. Because another thing about music and kind of collective psychology is that it's being a fan and belonging to a group of fans of an artist that means so much and makes it so meaningful for us. So because it makes it so meaningful for us to be part of a fan base, to be part of a collective, and we're all fans of someone, and it doesn't even matter if the artist is still alive, we can still be fans and we can still have a connection with them. Because of that very human part of us, then AI generated music itself is not such a threat. It can never compete with human artists. It can never replace human music. It just can't. However, Spotify in particular is making it very difficult for many artists, especially smaller musicians, to make a living off of streaming their music. And I think you need something like 1 million streams a month just to break minimum wage as a musician, and 1 million streams a month is not an easy feat. Many smaller musicians who are very talented and have a, like small dedicated fan base aren't going to crack that, and they're going to struggle to actually dedicate their full-time living towards making music. And that is a real shame, and I think that is a big problem for the state of music as a whole and our society and culture. So there is a real problem with that. But music will survive, and I do believe in humanity over machines. I do believe that this AI music trend is just a trend. It has no longevity and it won't last. But I do think it's really worth quitting Spotify if you're still signing up for that. It's not very hard to change music platforms. I think all of the other music platforms, yes, they all have their other problems. I know they're all big evil tech companies, but Spotify, in my mind, is the worst of the lot. I personally switched to YouTube Music and I use that, and it works pretty well with YouTube Premium. I've tried Apple Music as well. Apple Music was pretty good. I think the thing is with something like Apple or Google, their main business model doesn't revolve around extracting profit from music streaming itself. It's just a secondary business model for them, so they don't have to screw and squeeze the artist in the same way. Obviously, there's other things like support your artist by buying merch, going to see live concerts and stuff like that when you can, but just think a little bit about the business model and how the artists themselves actually make money, because it does really matter. And if we all consciously engage with music and how we support the musicians who make the art that we love, then that's going to make a big difference. I mean, we can all talk about memories. I can talk about how when I was 10 years old, one of my favorite albums was Demon Days by Gorillaz. I get a few years older and I'm watching all these heavy metal bands on TV. When that was still a thing. There used to be those TV music channels growing up, and I'd be really into Nirvana and Rage Against the Machine and Foo Fighters, System of a Down. Really rebellious music. Really helped me channel my kind of teenage angst and problems with authority at the time. Then I got a little bit older. I really got into hip hop, and I'm sort of like 16 or 17, and I'm really not happy with the situation that I'm in. I don't have any money, and it's like I feel so stuck. And I'm listening to 50 Cent, I'm listening to Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Wu-Tang Clan, and it's just like firing me up and making me dream and giving me this energy. It's channeling my energy into something that I could look forward to and have this ambition. And then I get older, like 10 years later, 28, 29 years old, and Kendrick Lamar, who disappeared for 5 years, didn't release any music after basically achieving everything he could mostly achieve in the rap game. Then Kendrick drops this album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and then that was my favorite rap album in a long time. In the last few years, that was the rap album that really spoke to me, and it really did, because it's like he just took such a big break and then drops this album where he's like looking into his own shadow, his own problems, and basically confronting himself in this album, and just really introspecting and going deep and soul searching. And it really spoke to me at the same time that I listened to it. And the point of me sharing some of these albums is that music just creates these memories for us, and it's so important that we just this AI generated stuff is just so meaningless. It's noise, it's annoying, and it's not the real thing. The real threat, I think, is the business model behind the business model behind the AI generated music, which is a separate topic in itself. And if you want to see me talk more about that, then just let me know. But it just matters, it's just meaningful, it matters, and it's an important topic to talk about, because if we engage consciously with music, then we can get so much more out of it. because music is just like, it's a way to tap into feelings, and a way to tap into, it's a way to connect with other people as well without having to go through the rational mind and use language, right? It completely bypasses the left hemisphere of our brain, and we just connect to something with our bodies. We can actually sync up with crowds of people through listening to a song, and that's a very special thing, and I think it's not something that most people appreciate. So that this business model around music and Spotify and what they're doing is so anti-human that it really bothers me, and it's something that I had to talk about on this video. So yeah, if you want more of my takes on AI and the business models around AI and the very kind of context around those business models, so like the actual economy itself and technology, then let me know, and I'll be very happy to make more like this. But that's probably enough for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.